Hey there! So, I started filming this video over a week ago, and I was a bit sick when I started, and right before I finished, my camera died, and I was really tired, so I figured, I'll finish tomorrow. Tomorrow came, and I felt like a walking zombie. So, it took me a while to get this video finished, but it's done now, so please enjoy. Merry Christmas, Happy New Year. Hello everyone, my name is Richard. Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays, and today I'm going to be reviewing The Way of Kings, the first book in the Stormlight Archive by Brandon Sanderson. Like my last video, I'm going to start with a spoiler-free review and give you a little bit of tidbits, basically the elevator pitch of the book, and then later on we're going to get into the more spoiler-heavy part of the review. For this book, we're seeing many different viewpoints, mostly those of Dalinar, the grizzled war veteran, whose late brother, the king, was murdered 5 years ago. Shallan, the young noble girl whose family is now facing financial ruin. And Kaladin, the soldier turned slave. We do get other viewpoint characters from time to time, but mostly these three, especially Kaladin, since we also get flashbacks of him showing his backstory. This book is an awesome first entry in the fantasy epic genre, especially with the prologue, which follows the prelude, so it's kind of like there's two prologues. It sank its hooks into me. So even though I think the book starts a bit slow, because of that awesome prologue, it sucked me in and got me to keep reading more, and it was well worth it. One thing you notice right off the bat with this book is the world building is incredible. If you like awesome world building, if you like having worlds that feel nothing like Earth, you will love this book. The flora and fauna are totally foreign, like 95% of the time. One thing you will notice about this book is that it is massive, okay? It is roughly 100,000 words shorter than the entire Lord of the Rings trilogy. It is longer than the first 3 Harry Potter books combined. It's a long book. That being said, everyone I've ever spoken to in person about this book says it's amazing. Everyone I've spoken to about this series says it's amazing. Of course, you can find online criticism, people that didn't like it, but I have never met those people in real life. If you like books with heroes, if you like books with betrayal, if you like books with espionage, this has all of that in there. I highly recommend it. I love this book. It's amazing. Go check it out. The magic system, there's so many mysteries to it just in this book. Even when you get to the end, it's like, I don't know how this works. It's amazing. Go check it out if you haven't, and if you have, you know. Before I get to the spoiler part of the review, my overall rating for this book is a 4 out of 5. I love it. It's great. I can't wait to read it again eventually one day. I just don't have time. There's so many more books I want to read. But the things that knock it down from a 5 for me are that it does drag on a bit at the beginning, right? It took, I think it's like chapter 11 or 13 or something, that chapter, until it really got its hooks in me. And then I was like, oh, okay, now I'm reading this book. And the world building, even though the world is very descriptive, I wish I got kind of more of the history and a little bit more of that kind of stuff. So that's why it gets a 4 out of 5. Still a very, very solid book. Now I'm going to jump into the spoiler part. Now I'm going to talk about the plot, and I'm going to start by talking about the things I didn't like, because I like talking about the things I like last. My first complaint is that the beginning with Kaladin feels like it drags on a little bit too long. He's just very sad, and he's just in his sadness. It makes sense why he feels the way he does, but just jumping into the book and not knowing his whole journey, right? Journey before destination, not knowing his whole journey, it just felt a little bit stretched to me. My other complaint with Kaladin's parts, in the early bits especially, is that some of the flashbacks felt superfluous, specifically the one where he fights the other kids in town with the staff, and the one where Tien gives him a rock and he's walking and talking with Laurel. Those just kind of give backstory, maybe a little bit of world building, but I was just like, why is this chapter here? When I was reading it, I didn't really see the point of it completely. I also want to say there's just too many bridge crew members for me to memorize. I could not memorize all of them at all in any way, shape, or form. I think it took me until I read the 3rd book in this series before I really started memorizing the bridge crew members' names. It's just way too many different characters. There's like 20 plus of them just from the bridge crew. It's too many. Jumping over to Shallan's part, I hear a lot of people didn't like her in the first book. I loved her. She's great. It took me until her plan was revealed, that her ultimate plan is to steal the Soulcaster from Yasna. Then it was like, ooh, I'm hooked. Until then I was like, that's kind of interesting. And then as soon as that part was introduced, as soon as that plot point was introduced, I was hooked. I was full in. I loved the parts with Shallan. An issue I had was with Cabsol's foreshadowing. The foreshadowing that he was an assassin, a bad guy, a Ghostblood. So there was no foreshadowing, at least none that I noticed, except for Yasna telling Shallan not to trust him. And I kind of hate when books do that, when the only clue you have that someone is bad is characters in the story telling the other character not to trust the bad character, if that makes sense. Like, there should be actions or something that that character says, or hints from that character that foreshadow it, not just, oh, Yasna's saying, oh, he's bad, don't trust him. That's kind of weak to me. Now, full disclosure, I did really like Cabsol and Shallan's parts together. I thought they were endearing, they were kind of cute. Cabsol's like, oh, I'm an ardent, I'm a religious man, but I got you bread and jam, and oh, it was cute. They were cute together, so I think his reveal was just kind of jarring to me because I thought they were cute together. I liked them together, so I didn't really jive with that twist exactly. Now is the time to talk about Dalinar. Dalinar's great, but with all these visions he's having, right? He's basically in a two-person call and doesn't realize his mic is on mute. Like the whole time until the very end of the call. And that leads to massive, massive conflict in the story. The one time that God randomly says yes is right after Dalinar asks a very specific question, and that random yes leads to a massive conflict. It leads to him trusting Sadeas, which allows Sadeas to backstab him and make this huge, admittedly epic, amazing fight. And when I was reading that part, I was like, oh my god, this is crazy. But it's so contrived. It's the most contrived thing in the book for me is that random yes leading to this huge conflict. I love that the conflict happened, but I hate that that was how it began, was because of the random yes after the random question. Now I'm going to talk about the parts of the plot I loved, and this is definitely going to be the longest part of the video because there is a lot to go through here. Now, I actually want to start with the flashbacks because I think they're really important. I know I complained about two of them earlier, but especially at the beginning of the book, they kind of act as a foil to Kaladin himself, because earlier he's very hopeful. He has these dreams of becoming a shard bearer, slaying some evildoer shard bearer and taking up the shards, becoming a Light Eyes, becoming a great hero. And then we flash forward to Kaladin and he's in a cage and nihilistic and just a broken man. Now this is really important because, like I said earlier, the beginning kind of dragged on for me because of how sad and down in the dumps Kaladin was. If we had that straight without these short breaks of flashbacks where Kaladin's young and, hopeful, it would have been really rough to get through. And I think that was kind of a purposeful choice by the author, and I think a good choice. In this book, I really like Lirin. Okay, he is very focused on one goal. He's very pinpoint in what he believes, and he's not really willing to cross that line, even if he's tempted. And that's the interesting part, is that in this book he is tempted to cross that line. He says his hands and Kaladin's hands are meant to heal, they're not meant to hurt. They're not meant to go be soldiers, because Kaladin expresses ideas of being a soldier, and I like how Kaladin is wishy-washy on that. He goes kind of back and forth, and I'll be a soldier, no, I'll be a surgeon. No, I'll be a soldier, no, I'll be a surgeon. He goes back and forth on that, and I like that dynamic and the conflict it makes with him and Lirin. I really enjoy the scene where Lirin is trying to save Rashon, and Rashon's son is dying, and Lirin's explaining, hey, there are 3 rules to be a surgeon. Number one, if people are equally hurt, you help the youngest. Number two, if someone's more hurt than the other, hurt the person that's more hurt first. And number three, know when you can't save someone. And you got to kind of cut your losses at that point. I also love this scene because you get the part where Lyran's hovering over Rashon's neck with his knife and is tempted. You can tell he's tempted to just literally cut the problem out of his life. But he doesn't, and he stays to his principles. Then there's also the whole plot line of, Rashon saying, you stole my spheres, and those are our spheres, and Lyran being like, no, they were given to me by the former lord, and da-da-da-da-da. And eventually finding out, yes, Lyran kind of fudged the man's will so that he would get those spheres. And that is a huge revelation. It largely impacts Kaladin's view of his father and about his opinions on what he should do in the future. Eventually, though, Kaladin does decide, hey, I want to be a surgeon, but then Rashon gets his revenge by naming Tien as one of the kids to be enlisted, and Kaladin volunteers to help stay with his brother, and then his brother dies anyway. Then, of course, we have the amazing part of Kaladin killing the Shardbearer. There was so much foreshadowing for this, and I didn't see it coming. I was kicking myself once I read that part. I'm like, how did I not see it coming? The book made that feat seem so unsurpassable, so monumental, that I never expected it to happen. And when it did, I was reading the book like, like I don't scream, I don't, go yes or clap or anything. I'll go like, or maybe if it's a sad book, I'll get like a little misty-eyed. But that's the biggest reaction you'll get out of me. I was so hyped at this part. Immediately after that part is you get the part where Amaram takes the few surviving members of his team, of his unit, kills them, and brands him a slave. Ugh, it's just, and Amaram even has a look. It says in the book he has a look where he feels guilty. He feels guilty about it, but he does it anyway, hinting that, there's more to this story. The flashbacks in this book, even though I criticized them a little bit earlier on, I think they are very strong, and overall, I love how they ended up in the big reveal at the end. Now, jumping to present-day Kaladin, the part where I was like, okay, I'm on board now, was when he went to the Honor Chasm, stared into the abyss, turned right back around and confronted Gaz. I was like, okay, let's go. This book is, I'm buying this book now. It's got me. I love Kaladin's parts where he did the training and the men were all like, we're not doing that. And then he, does it by himself and eventually some men join. I like the part where he plans to get the medicine and then sell it back to the apothecary and finds out, hey, the apothecary ripping them off. But they're not really ripping the people off because, they had to uproot their lives and move to this place. And so it's kind of added cost of having to live in this desolate land. Oh, it's just the whole part. It's just good. I also really enjoyed, the magic when Kaladin's testing out. Ooh, I can make rocks stick to the wall. I can climb up. How they would sneak money up out of the chasms. I really enjoyed that. The chasm kata, I guess it's pronounced, the practice forms and stuff he did with the spear. All that really cool. Then you got to the part where Kaladin did the side hold. They did the side hold in the bridge. That led to a defeat for Sadeas' troops. And he, held on to the rock and lived through the storm. And then Teft realizes, oh my gosh, my parents were not crazy. Well, they were crazy, but they were right, basically. Kaladin is extremely injured after the ordeal in the High Storm. But he gets better very quickly. And he goes out with the bridge crew on a run, just handing out water. And being able to sit back and watch the battle, he realizes why they can't wear armor. Because they're bait. This almost destroys Kaladin again. And then they're stuck on permanent chasm duty. And eventually he, trains them. He starts practicing his magic powers that he suddenly has and sticking rocks to walls. They get money and all that kind of stuff. And he's able to still cling to some kind of hope. Then there is his big epic, fight at the end, which I'm going to talk more about when I talk about Dalinar too, because they're kind of linked together. Now we're going to talk about Shallan. Like I said, I love Shallan's parts. I love the whole hiding in plain sight thing, because it always gives you this sense of tension. She never feels safe. You as the reader always feel like, okay, there's something that could trip her up. She could get found out, especially after she takes the Soulcaster. I also really enjoyed her scholarliness, how she just wanted to learn for the sake of learning. She loves learning, and that's ultimately why Yasna took her on as a ward. The part where, at the very beginning, where she goes to get all these books, and she applies to be Yasna's ward a second time, and then a third time, until she finally gets accepted. I really like that tenacity and that, again, like I said, thirst for knowledge. You have this part later in the book where Yasna takes Shallan to a shadier part of town, and they predictably get jumped. Yasna immediately kills them. The way I see it is, yes, Yasna was justified in defending herself, because those men probably would have killed her, or at the very least hurt her and Shallan very badly. But if you're hanging out with someone who's looking for opportunities where they can kill people, regardless of if they're justified or not, probably not someone you want to look up to. Throughout most of Shallan's story, right, she keeps seeing and drawing these swirling faces, and I had no clue what they were about, right? I was very interested in that, and by the end of the book, we still don't 100% know what the swirling faces are. You can kind of guess and get an idea, but the book never says why she's seeing those. Why do they have some kind of weird power that she can sometimes tap into? One such example of seeing the swirling faces is when she's drawing her and Capsule together, and she draws a swirling face. She runs away. She goes to her room. She's touching a goblet when a voice asks her, "What are you?" And she says, "I'm terrified." This allows her to use some magic power to soul cast the goblet into blood, but she thinks it's the Soulcaster, or at least everyone else will think it's going to be the Soulcaster, right? So, to hide that, she injures herself to make it look like she was trying to do very, very bad things to herself, right? The next thing we get with Shallan, she is in the hospital. She is being visited by Yasna and Capsule. Capsule gives her some bread and jam, which happened to be poisoned. And then she has to reveal that she stole the Soulcaster so that Yasna can save her life. The next scene we have is she wakes up in a room again with very different security protocols in place. Once she's able to get out of the bed, she then goes to Yasna because she realizes that some things do not add up with Yasna's abilities, and she is able to figure out that Yasna can soulcast without a soulcaster, and that the soulcaster has always been a decoy. At this point, Yasna's playing dumb a little bit. She's like, well, of course I have decoy soulcasters, which, makes sense. But Shallan's not having it. She asks the voice in her head, "Are you there?" And it's like, yes, I'm here. And it asks for more truth, and she says, "I killed my father." Whoa. I reread this part in the book for this review, and it gave me goosebumps again. Reading it out of context gave me goosebumps. It's awesome. This scene gets me so... I love this part of the book. It's awesome. This, of course, drops Shallan into Shadesmar, and Yasna reaches in and pulls her back out. She's like, "You're an idiot, you're an idiot." And then eventually they agree, "Okay, you will never lie to me again." But we're cool now, basically. Now, let's jump over to Dalinar, because his introduction's great. We get him fighting a chasm fiend. Literally grabs it with his bare hands at one point. It's awesome. It's great. Very cinematic fight. During this fight, the way Dalinar interacts with his sons and with Elokar, they all kind of tell you what he thinks of them, and I think it's a really, really strong introduction to a character. Elokar is kind of an interesting character because you have to deal with his paranoia of everything, and then his strap breaking, which eventually we realized was him. He cut it himself just so people would take seriously the things that he's been seeing in the mirrors. This, of course, led to the whole investigation of how the, saddle strap was cut, how it was broken. And that wasn't too interesting to me, the whole nuts and bolts of it. But what was interesting was how Sadeas and Dalinar fought politically with each other. Through this, we also see Dalinar and Sadeas' disagreements on how they, order around their army, how they manage things. Even if they both want the same end, they disagree heavily on how to reach that end. Side note, I love Adolin. Adolin's awesome. He's probably my favorite character in the whole series, right? He has very pretty boy problems of, all these women want to date me, but I don't like any of them. Like, he's such an entertaining character to read. Also, his conflict with his father of, wanting to support his father, but at the same time, he's worried that his father is being led astray by these visions he's having. Strangely, one of my favorite scenes with Dalinar is when he's thinking about, why don't we use shards for more practical uses? Why do we just use them for war? And so he goes, uses a sword, and uses a hammer to dig out a latrine, basically. Something that would have been done by, many, many, many men over a much longer period of time. And he's just doing it, and while he's doing it, he's very introspective. He's thinking about his place in the world. Should he trust the visions? Is he going crazy? Right? Because he is still sane enough to believe that he might be going crazy, and that's a possibility, right? In fact, he's so engrossed in what he's doing. I love how the hammer's bent back like this. Navani shows up, tells him he's late for their appointment, and he's like, isn't that for another hour? It's like, no, that time has passed. So he was just totally absorbed in it. Now, I know I kind of hated on this vision earlier in my review, but one of my favorite moments with Dalinar is the vision where he is just kind of the peasant person and fights off the shadow monsters with a fire poker. This scene is great for a bunch of reasons. Number one, it has heart. Dalinar, in the vision, he's fighting to defend these people. Number two, it has great, great world building. You learn about wind stance and smoke stance, both of which I find really interesting, how the different fighting styles work, when they're advantageous, when they're disadvantageous. You learn about the Knights Radiant, right? You learn about the geography of the world and some of the history and these different cities and the different countries of the time. Plus, I really liked, the fight scene of fighting the shadow monsters with fire poker. All of that stuff wrapped together. It's a very, very good scene for all the reasons I listed. And I'm going to talk about Dalinar's ending with, the betrayal of Sadeas and returning and paying with his shard blade at the end when I talk about the endings. Just real quick, I'm going to talk about the characters, the ones I really liked and why I liked them. I love Kaladin in this book. At the end of this book, I was like, Kaladin's my boy, right? He goes from this wretch. I mean, one of the chapters literally is the wretch, or just wretch, I think. And he claws back hope. He fights for hope. And it's really inspiring. It's a great, zero to hero kind of story. Going along with Kaladin, of course, is Syl. Syl's great in this book. She's slowly learning to become more and more human. And her quirks are just really entertaining. She's always funny and adds a lot of life to every scene she's in. Then we get to my favorite bridge crew member is Rock. I can't say his real name, but Rock is awesome, okay? Every scene he's in, the way he talks, he makes me smile. I want more of Rock as much as possible, please. Then we get to Wit, Hoyd, and he's one of the funniest characters I've ever read in a book. It must have taken a long time to sit and think of this dialogue, because almost everything he says can be seen two ways, and it's always a backhanded remark or a hidden insult. Very entertaining. I love Wit Hoyd in this book. Shallan's great in this book. Again, I really like her. She has this moral dilemma of, do I do my duty for my family and fulfill what I promised to them, or do I do what I believe is right and continue to work with Yasna? And that moral dilemma is really engaging for me. I really enjoyed it. Going with Shallan, we have Yasna, who is just this great badass lady. I want to know more about her. She's just awesome in this book. She does not take any kind of crap from anyone, and she can turn people into crystals. So, a very interesting character I want to know more about. Then there's Dalinar, very honorable. When I talked to my friends about Dalinar, some of them said, man, I would ride a horse into battle with Dalinar. But he's in this kind of identity crisis, and in the process of reinventing himself. And even though I've never had magical visions from a hurricane myself, and I feel most people have had times when you've doubted yourself, and I find him really relatable because of that. Adeline, he's like the dog of characters. Everyone likes him. I'm not a big fan of the, next lady thing, but he really cares for his family. He cares about the kingdom and the people around him. And, oh, God, I don't know. I just like Adeline a lot. This next character I haven't really talked about much is Zeth. I really enjoyed the parts with Zeth. The idea with his oath stone and he's not supposed to walk on rock, and the reveal with Taravangian or Vagian. I don't know how to say his name, but with the old T guy and the bald dude in the white with the rock, very, very interesting to me. Now I want to talk about world building. Most of this book is in the Shattered Plains, and there's no dirt there. It's just rocks, and plants have adapted to grow out of rocks. The species on this world, the Parshendi, the Axe Hounds, the Chasm Fiends, they're all really fitting for this kind of setting. I really enjoyed that. Then you have the plants, the literal plants called a rock bud. It like grows into basically a rock, and you can get some kind of food from it. The grass lays down, the trees lay down, because there's always these hurricanes that occur, and so they had to adapt and evolve in such a way that they could live through constant magic hurricanes. Then you get to the cultural differences. In Vorinism, you get the light eyes and dark eyes split. You get the safe hand for the women. For the men, they're not allowed to read. I found all of these kind of taboos and customs are really interesting, and they make the world feel totally foreign and something new. A lot of the world building we get through Dalinar's visions and Yasna's research, which are totally opposite, right? Dalinar's is kind of a first-hand account, just seeing what happens, and then Yasna's is, reading on a page, and Shallan's to reading on the page, where they might get a more complete picture, but they don't really see what's happening, right? So it's different aspects of it. Then you have shard blades and shard plate. Power armor and power swords are a big trope in fantasy, but I think this is a great take on it. Why do shard blades take 10 heartbeats to summon? Why does shard plate need Stormlight to regenerate itself, right? It's really cool. I love this system. Before we get to the endings, I just want to make a note of the personal impact this book had on me, like my emotional response. This book is the first epic fantasy I've read in over a decade, right? Or close to about a decade. And it's amazing. I'm definitely gonna read more epic fantasy. I've started reading The Wheel of Time now, and it's totally sucked me back into the genre of epic fantasy. I'm gonna read a lot more. I feel like that should tell you how much I love this book, and it got me to read the next book in the series, and then the next book in the series, and then the next book in the series, including all the novellas in between. So I'm really excited for the final book, right? I got the final book just recently, so I'm gonna read that when I'm done with Eye of the World, and I'm very excited for it. And it's because this first book was so great. It really affected me a lot. Overall, this is my second favorite of the series. Now, I haven't read Wind and Truth yet, so that ranking might change after I read that book. But it's a great entry, and it poses a ton of questions for the end. There are questions for Dalinar, like, should he trust others, or should he trust his visions? For Kaladin, can he trust and believe in himself again for, the 10th time after he's been knocked down? For Shallan, the question of family duty versus what she believes is right, I think that's really, really compelling. So this book was just amazing. Now I want to talk about the endings, because this book feels like it had 2, 3, maybe 4 different endings, and they're all amazing. You had the battle with Kaladin going in, finally going like, basically powering up, getting his level up in video game terms, and just going toe-to-toe with all the different Parshendi, going in there, ordering around Light Eyes, ordering around Adeline, saving Dalinar, getting them all back, and it's just so badass. The part where he's just deciding should he do it or not, and he remembers his father's words to him, and so good. Meanwhile, the whole time Dalinar is thinking about how he led all of these men to slaughter, including his own son. They're gonna lose the shards to the Parshendi. It's gonna make the war go longer. Realizing he shouldn't have trusted Sidious. It's so like, you feel for him. Because he can't stop fighting, but at the same time he knows he's gonna die. He thankfully doesn't, but in that moment he doesn't know that, right? Then finally, Dalinar comes back and he purchases the slaves from Sidious with his shard blade. He has the moment with Kaladin where he asks Kaladin how much is a human life worth. He says it's priceless, and Dalinar's like, well, I got a pretty good bargain then, didn't I? He promotes Kaladin. Kaladin's become the guard. He's gonna train all the men. It's such a satisfying ending to this book. So satisfying for Dalinar, so satisfying for Kaladin and the whole bridge crew. One of the most satisfying endings I've gotten from a book. We also have the little mini extra ending with Sess and Taravangian, where you find out Taravangian's been just killing people to hear their death rattles, to get clues for whatever there is to come. You get him ordering the death of Dalinar, which this is right after we find out Kaladin has made Dalinar's head bodyguard. So right off the bat, the foreshadowing there that it sets up was so tantalizing to me. Anyway, the ending with Seth and Taravangian, real short, real epic though. And oh god, I love the reveal. If I had to pick one ending that I think is the most impactful though, I'm gonna go with Shallan's. The reveal of the Parshmen and the Parshendi being the Voidbringers completely changes the context of everything in the book. It gives this book so much more rereadability. I can't wait to read it again when eventually I do. And the entire civilization that the people of the Alethi country and the Alethkar and the people from Jak Haved, it completely changes their entire way of life if that is revealed and people believe it. It's so like earth-shattering, such a huge important discovery. It blew my mind. The most surprising thing I think from this book is such a good twist. Such a good twist. Anyway, that's it for this review. Let me know down in the comments what your favorite part of this book was, or if you disagree with me on anything. I'm interested to see why you think so. Anyways, Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays, Happy New Year, and have a good 2025.